Help you? I said, that touch of wariness resurfacing in my timbre. Perhaps. Perhaps, said Isaac. Yes, perhaps. I suppose the answer depends on what you're doing. Nothing dangerous, I presume? No, not dangerous, Mr. Feynman. Necessary and fundamental, he said, applying a goodly amount of weight to the final word. It's what drives all of my work on quantum superposition and waveform collapse, my work on time travel, even my work on neurochemistry and memory. It's all aimed at the same worldwide problem, the failure of empirical observation to conform to calculation. I whatted? Nothing works like it's supposed to. This had been my experience too. I'd purchased blenders, lawn-mowers, roller skates, and any number of other goods which had gone phut moments after their warranty periods had expired. The habit of goods giving up their ghosts just when you needed them unbroken is the whole reason my friend Vera, the medium and small appliance repair person, whom I think I mentioned earlier, had any career at all. But it seemed a goofy focus for serious scientific thought. So, you want to fix broken thingamies? I said, stringing along. I want to fix the world, said Isaac. The whole universe. I raised a couple of eyebrows and encouraged annotations. I mean to say, you can't go about the joint saying you want to fix the whole universe without offering up a slab of explanation. Consider the planets, he said, rising slowly from his chair, lifting his arms and slipping into what I might have called a soliloquy, but for the fact that he was saying it to me. Perhaps lecture is mo juster, but whatever you want to call his little slice of exposition, its contents ran as follows. I've spent hours calculating projected planetary orbits. I've taken account of every conceivable variable. My results are indisputable, my equations elegant, my solutions perfect, and yet the orbits we observe, those actually followed by the planets, deviate from those predicted. Unacceptable! And take the rate of the expansion of the universe, he continued, now pacing around the room. Based on the model I've developed and the calculations I've run, the universe should expand more quickly than it does. My calculations also predict observable supersymmetry, dark matter, cosmic strings, and detectable multiverses. Yet none of this is observed. Black holes behave incorrectly, and I've found similar discrepancies in the context of cellular regeneration, DNA mutation, chemical decomposition, weather patterns, light refraction, stand-up comedy, folk music, phenomena from every field of inquiry. In every context I examine, phenomena fail to correspond to my calculations. Oh, perhaps your calculations are off, I said. He gave me an austere look. It was the look of a chap whose calculations are never off. No, he said gravely, and then, even gravelier, he added, it's reality that's wrong. Now, I don't know how this last slab of dialogue landed on you, but it struck me as a bit thick. I mean, setting aside the narcissism of it all, it seemed churlish to shake one's fist at the universe simply because it was bad with figures. Give it a break, I might have said, had Isaac and I been on matier terms. I'm sure half of the things I do in a given day fail to square up with your ruddy calculations. But I kept these thoughts to myself. I suppose the failure of the universe to string along with your mathematical thingamies might vex any chap who draws his weekly envelope by fiddling with numbers and occupying Lucasian chairs. I therefore refrained from interrupting and let this overconfident number cruncher press on, hoping he might soon sum up, as it were. Besides, I could see that he was enthralled by his own speech. His eyes were alight with the fire I had hitherto observed only behind pulpits or under tinfoil hats. Virtually nothing behaves as it should, he continued, now displaying something you might call ecstasy, a word I wouldn't have thought could come within several nautical miles of maths. Even some of my own inventions follow this pattern. My own eyewear. Whenever I relied on observation in creating my devices, rather than designing them through pure mathematical models, I saw the same pattern. These devices shouldn't work, but they do. My subsequent calculations, based on after-acquired data, consistently prove these devices shouldn't have ever functioned at all. They were doing things that ought to have been impossible. Just as it was with the IPT. It worked in practice, but calculation proved it impossible. The inescapable conclusion is that there's an unexplained wrongness in the universe. A wrongness that touches everything: physics, chemistry, biology, the very building blocks of reality. I couldn't fathom its source until I observed the city solicitor's battle within the cavern. So, what's the source? I asked, intently. That's not important, he said, waxing off the inquiry like a picnicker shooing away a wasp he hadn't invited. I've determined that we can exclude any reference to the source from our solution. What matters, Mr. Feynman, is that I've found a way to correct these errors. I can adjust the world itself, the very fabric of reality, so that it corresponds to my calculations. I can make it work as it should. Thus far, I'm able to make only slight adjustments, correct minor discrepancies and marginal deviations, but my methods are improving. I continue to refine them. With your help, I'll soon have the power to change everything all at once. My heart stood still. It was as if a chilled, spectral hand had gripped my shoulder. For as soon as the confirmed egghead had uttered the words, "I'll soon have the power to change everything all at once," I knew that here must be the threat that had put Abe's knickers into a twist. I had, unless I was much mistaken, zeroed in on whatever it was that led Abe to declare this Lucasian chump, this method marauder, to be Detroit's most dangerous man. I gathered my wits about me and probed for further details. "Everything changed," I said. You wouldn't care to amplify that, would you? Explain precisely what it is you propose to do?" He leveled an icy gaze at me. "If you'd care to describe this icy gaze as piercing, or as one that featured several black holes worth of gravity, you wouldn't hear an objection from me. Only after subjecting me to this piercing, icy, gravity-laden stare for several heartbeats, apparently peering through my physical person and assessing the Feynman soul, did Isaac finally surface and come across with the goods. "It's the most ambitious experiment anyone has ever conceived," he said, as though reading from a grant application. "What I propose, Mr. Feynman, is nothing short of universal readjustment, the wholesale reweaving of the fabric of Detroit." "Golly," I said. "I've seen beyond the veil," he continued, in a rapturous sort of way. When he spoke again, his voice was husky with emotion. "With your help, I'll achieve my goal of changing Detroit at the quantum level." My ears perked up. I sat up straighter. What he had said had set my glial cells aflame. "The quantum level, you say? Your goal? all of this work you're pursuing is aimed at changing Detroit at the quantum level?" "It is," he said. "This great experiment, this reweaving of which you speak, you mean to tell me your efforts are focused exclusively on quantum whatnots, those thingamies that whiz around unseen inside everything, but which can't be detected without several thousand quid worth of government-funded lab equipment?" "Well, yes," said Isaac, looking at me as though I'd lost a marble or two. What this chump didn't realize was that he'd underestimated the suave and debonair guest before him, and that I was hep to his science jargon. I read all about this quantum business in the fairly recent past, having discovered the May edition of Popular Science in my powder room at the Hôtel de la Lune. I perused an article on quantum thingamies for the space of at least 15 minutes before concluding that the title Popular Science had been intentionally ironic. "So," I said, preparing to demonstrate the fruits of my encounter with this Popular Science rag, "your attention is directed solely at quarks, bosons, gluons, and what have you?" "Precisely," said Isaac. "The key to my plan lies in adjusting reality at the subatomic level, manipulating the eigenvalues of elementary particles and their constituents." "And by subatomic," I said, just to ensure I'd collared the gist, "you mean, in fact, smaller than atoms. This reweaving you describe, your experiments, all of your fiddling with the fabric of Detroit, it is focused entirely on messing about with the subatomic thingamies?" "Absolutely," said he. "So, just teeny tiny things, then?" "I suppose so, but—" "Your efforts are confined to the realm of the infinitesimally small, the teensy-weensy, the I can't even see the bally things without a couple of highly powered microscopes level." "Yes," said Isaac, a touch defensively. "But when I implement these quantum-level changes—" "I've heard enough," I said, waving a dismissive teacup, for I had, in fact, heard enough. And, as you might imagine, my relief at what I'd heard was stupendous. It's not going too far to say that the only circumstance that I was sitting in a chair kept me from dancing a carefree step. This officious number cruncher was, as Abe had foreshadowed, tugging at the very thread that formed the fabric of Detroit. But he was doing so on such a minute scale that it didn't matter a single damn. The quantum level, I mean to say. If he wanted to poke around with subatomic doodads, snapping a lepton here and a gluon there, then who was I to stand in this chump's way? "Carry on, Newton," I might have said, "and may Abe speed your efforts." For now I saw that Abe had gotten things all wrong. He could be forgiven for this, of course, not being privy to the hot news I'd uncovered. Abe must have heard that Isaac was, to use the fellow's own impassioned hyperbolic lingo, mucking about with the very fabric of the universe, or shaking Detroit to its very foundations. But what Abe failed to realize was the laughably small scale of Isaac's fiddling. This science fancier was no cloven-hoofed terrorizer of the innocent, but merely a peevish nerd, intent on fiddling with infinitesimally teensy-weensy things which even the meanest intellect could perceive would be of no consequence to anyone. I knew in a heartbeat this was one of those misunderstandings you often get, those laughable cases where one half of the world doesn't know what the other 3/4 is up to. the quantum level. That's all it was. An amoeba might take note of Isaac's experiments, but nothing but an amoeba, and even then, only an amoeba with a magnifying glass. Now that the scales had fallen from mine eyes, as the expression is, I realized Isaac wasn't a danger to anyone at all, with the possible exception of undergraduate students who messed up their long division. He certainly wasn't a candidate for the office of most dangerous chump in the world. Let him tinker with his quantum thingamies, and I hope he has a fine day for it. I breathed a heartfelt sigh of relief.